Hello and welcome, dear students. In today's program, we are going to discuss an important concept, that is theories of communication. The main objectives of today's lecture are to know the meaning of communication, to know about various theories of communication, and to know the sources of theories of communication. Classroom events are often so complex that just talking with students can become confusing. It helps to think of the challenge as a problem in communication, or as Laswell in 1964 put it, of who says what to whom and with what effect. In classrooms, things often do not happen at an even pace or in a logical order, or with just the teacher and one student interacting while others listen or wait patiently. While such moments do occur, events may sometimes instead be more like a kaleidoscope of overlapping interactions, disruptions, and decision, even when activities are generally going well. One way to manage these situations is to understand and become comfortable with the key features of communication that are characteristic of classrooms. One set of features has to do with the functions or purposes of communication, especially the balance among talk related to content, to procedures, and to controlling behavior. Another feature has to do with the nature of non-verbal communication, how it supplements and sometimes even contradicts what is said verbally. A third feature has to do with the unwritten expectations held by students and teachers about how to participate in particular kinds of classroom activities. Now, dear students, let us discuss theories of communication. The study of communication and mass media has led to the formulation of many theories. Structural and functional theories believe that the social structures are real and function in ways that can be observed objectively. Cognitive and behavioral theories tend to focus on psychology of individuals. Interactionist theories view social life as a process of interaction. Interpretive theories uncover the ways people actually understand their own experience, and critical theories are concerned with the conflict of interests in society and the way communication perpetuates domination of one group over another. The earliest theories were those propounded by Western theorists Siebert, Peterson, and Schramm in their book Four Theories of the Press in 1956. These were termed normative theories by McKewell in the sense that they mainly express ideas of how the media ought to or can be expected to operate under a prevailing set of conditions and values. Each of the four original or classical theories is based on a particular political theory or economic scenario. Let us first discuss these four classical theories, and after that we shall also be discussing some other important theories of communication. Classical theories. In classical theories, we are having four theories, and first is authoritarian theory. According to this theory, mass media, though not under the direct control of the state, had to follow its bidding. Under an authoritarian approach in Western Europe, freedom of thought was jealously guarded by a few people, means ruling classes, who were concerned with the emergence of a new middle class and were worried about the effects of printed matter on their thought process. Steps were taken to control the freedom of expression. The result was advocacy of complete dictatorship. The theory promoted zealous obedience to a hierarchical superior and reliance on threat and punishment to those who did not follow the censorship rules or did not respect authority. Censorship of the press was justified on the ground that the state always took precedence over the individual's right to freedom of expression. This theory stemmed from the authoritarian philosophy of Plato, who thought that the state was safe only in the hands of a few wise men. Thomas Hobbes, a British academician, argued that the power to maintain order was sovereign and individual objections were to be ignored. Engel, a German thinker, further reinforced the theory by stating that freedom came into its supreme right only under authoritarianism. The world has been witness to authoritarian means of control over media by both dictatorial and democratic governments. Second, libertarianism or free press theory. This movement is based on the right of an individual and advocates absence of restraint. The basis of this theory dates back to 17th century England, when the printing press made it possible to print several copies of a book or pamphlet at cheap rates. The state was thought of as a major source of interference on the rights of an individual and his property. Libertarians regarded taxation as institutional theft. Popular will was granted precedence over the power of state. Advocates of this theory were Lao Tzu, an early 16th century philosopher, John Locke of Great Britain in the 17th century, John Milton, the epic poet, and John Stuart Mill, an essayist. Third, social responsibility theory. Virulent critics of the free press theory were Wilbur Schramm, Siebert, and Theodore Peterson. In their book Four Theories of Press, they stated, pure libertarianism is antiquated, outdated, and obsolete. They advocated the need for its replacement by the social responsibility theory. This theory can be said to have been initiated in the United States by the Commission of the Freedom of Press in 1949. The Commission found that the free market approach to press freedom had only increased the power of a single class and has not served the interests of the less well-off classes. The emergence of radio, TV, and film suggested the need for some means of accountability. Thus, the theory advocated some obligation on the part of the media to society. A judicial mix of self-regulation and state regulation and high professional standards were imperative. Fourth, Soviet media communist theory. This theory is derived from the ideologies of Marx and Engels, that the ideas of the ruling class are the ruling ideas. It was thought that the entire mass media was saturated with bourgeois ideology. Lenin thought of private ownership as being incompatible with freedom of press, and the modern technological means of information must be controlled for enjoying effective freedom of press. The theory advocated that the sole purpose of mass media was to educate the great masses of workers and not to give out information. The public was encouraged to give feedback, as it was the only way the media would be able to cater to its interests. Now, magic bullet, hypodermic needle, stimulus response theory. Before the World War I, there was no separate field of study on communication, but knowledge about mass communication was accumulating. An outcome of World War I propaganda efforts, the magic bullet or hypodermic needle theory came into existence. It propounded the view that the mass media had a powerful influence on the mass audience and could deliberately alter or control people's behavior. Then, uses and gratification theory. This theory, propounded by Coates in 1970, is concerned with how people use media for gratification of their needs. Uses and gratification theorists explain why people choose and use certain media forms. The theory emphasizes a limited effect position, that is, the media have a limited effect on their audiences because audiences are able to exercise control over their media. The uses and gratification approach reminds us that people use media for many purposes. As media users become increasingly confronted with choices, this approach should direct our attention to the audience. In general, researchers have found 4 kinds of gratifications. Number 1, information. We want to find out about society and the world. We want to satisfy our curiosity. This would fit the news and documentaries, which both give us a sense that we are learning about the world. Second, personal identity. We may watch the television in order to look for models for our behavior. So, for example, we may identify with characters that we see in soap. The characters help us to decide what we feel about ourselves. Third, integration and social interaction. We use the media in order to find out more about the circumstances of other people. Watching a show helps us to empathize and sympathize with the lives of others so that we may even end up thinking of the characters in program as friends. Fourth, entertainment. Sometimes we simply use the media for enjoyment, relaxation, or just to fill time. Then, spiral of silence theory. Spiral of silence theory propounded by Elizabeth Newell Newman. This theory states that the media publicizes opinions that are mainstream and people adjust their opinions according to their perceptions to avoid being isolated. Individuals who perceive their own opinion as being accepted will express it, whilst those who think themselves as being a minority suppress their views. Innovators and change agents are unafraid to voice different opinions as they do not fear isolation. Then, consistency theories. Festinger formulated the consistency theories that talked about people's need for consistency in their beliefs and judgments. In order to reduce dissonance created by inconsistencies in belief, judgment, and actions, people expose themselves to information that is consistent with their ideas and actions, and they shut out other communications. Now, media dependency theory. Media dependency theory is developed by Ball, Rokeach, and de Fleur. The key idea behind this theory is that audiences depend on media information to meet needs and reach goals, and social institutions and media systems interact with audiences to create needs, interests, and motives in the person. The degree of dependence is influenced by the number and centrality of information, functions, and social stability. Social learning theory. Social learning theory is formulated by Albert Bandura at Stanford University. This specifies that mass media messages give audience members an opportunity to identify with attractive characters that demonstrate behavior, engage emotions, and allow mental rehearsal and modeling of new behavior. The behavior of models in the mass media also offers vicarious reinforcement to motivate audience members' adoption of the behavior. Now, let us discuss cognitive dissonance theory. Students, cognitive dissonance theory argues that the experience or dissonance or incompatible beliefs and actions is aversive and people are highly motivated to avoid it. In their efforts to avoid feelings of dissonance, people will avoid hearing views that oppose their own, change their beliefs to match their actions, and seek reassurance after making a difficult decision. Communication accommodation theory. This theoretical perspective examines the underlying motivations and consequences of what happens when two speakers shift their communication styles. Communication accommodation theorists argue that during communication, people will try to accommodate or adjust their style of speaking to others. This is done in two ways: divergence and convergence. Groups with strong ethnic or racial pride often use divergence to highlight group identity. Convergence occurs when there is a strong need for social approval, frequently from powerless individuals. Now, coordinated management of meaning. Theorists in coordinated management of meaning believe that in conversation, people co-create meaning by attaining some coherence and coordination. Coherence occurs when stories are told, and coordination exists when stories are lived. CMM focuses on the relationship between an individual and his or her society. Through a hierarchical structure, individuals come to organize the meaning of literally hundreds of messages received throughout a day. Now, students, let us discuss cultural approach to organizations. The cultural approach contends that people are like animals who are suspended in webs that they created. Theorists in this tradition argue that an organization's culture is composed of shared symbols, each of which has a unique meaning. Organizational stories, rituals, and rites of passage are examples of what constitutes the culture of an organization. Now, another theory is cultural studies. Theorists in cultural studies maintain that the media represents ideologies of the dominant class in a society. Because media are controlled by corporations, the information presented to the public is necessarily influenced and framed with profit in mind. Cultural studies theorists, therefore, are concerned with media influence and how power plays a role in the interpretation of culture. Now, expectancy violations theory. Expectancy violation theory examines how nonverbal messages are structured. The theory advances that when communicative norms are violated, the violation may be perceived either favorably or unfavorably, depending on the perception that the receiver has of the violator. Violating another's expectations may be a strategy used over that of conforming to another's expectations. Now, muted group theory. Muted group theory maintains that language serves men better than women, and perhaps European Americans better than African Americans or other groups. This is the case because the variety of experiences of European American men are named clearly in language, whereas the experiences of other groups such as women are not. Due to this problem, with language, women appear less articulate than men in public settings. As women have similar experiences, this situation should change. Now, students, let us discuss the narrative paradigm. This theory argues that humans are storytelling animals. The narrative paradigm proposes a narrative logic to replace the traditional logic of argument. Narrative logic, or the logic of good reasons, suggests that people judge the credibility of speakers by whether their stories hang together clearly, coherence, and whether their stories ring true, fidelity. The narrative paradigm allows for a democratic judgment of speakers because no one has to be trained in oratory or persuasion to make judgments based on coherence and fidelity. Students, let us discuss now one important theory, that is organizational information theory. This theory argues that the main activity of organizations is the process of making sense of equivocal information. Organizational members accomplish this sense-making process through enactment, selection, and retention of information. Organizations are successful to the extent that they are able to reduce equivocality through these means. Now, social exchange theory. This theoretical position argues that the major force in interpersonal relationships is the satisfaction of both people's self-interest. Theorists in social exchange posit that self-interest is not necessarily a bad thing and that it can actually enhance relationships. The social exchange approach views interpersonal exchanges as analogues to economic exchanges, where people are satisfied when they receive a fair return on their expenditures. Dear students, now symbolic interaction theory. This theory suggests that people are motivated to act based on the meanings they assign to people, things, and events. Further, meaning is created in the language that people use both with others and in private thought. Language allows people to develop a sense of self and to interact with others in community. With this, we end our today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed. Thank you.